everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be crocheting this easy bobble and lace le nuage wrap. Now le nuage is French for cloud, and I had to name it that because this wrap really just feels like you're snuggling up in a cloud. I used Lion Brand's brand new yarn. It's called Feels Like Butta, and you guys, they named it that for a reason. I saw this for the first time when I went to visit Lion Brand in New York, and I instantly fell in love. It's my new favorite yarn. It's only available online right now, so visit the link in the description to grab some. Now it's going to suggest a size G hook, and I'm using a J. Now, if you were to use a G with this yarn, it's going to create a little bit of a stiffer fabric, which is fine, but for wearables and especially this lacy wrap that I really want to drape nicely, I'm going to use a much larger hook in the form of a J. So here I have another skein that doesn't have the label on it. You can just see how squishy this yarn is. It's made of 100% polyester, and it has the feel of chenille style yarn. We've all felt chenille style yarns in the form of some blanket yarns, but the issue with those yarns usually is that they tend to shed. They're a little bit more difficult to work with, especially for wearables because they're so chunky. But this Feels Like Butta yarn has a very similar feel. It's super, super, super soft. It feels like a chenille blanket, but it's thin enough. It's a category 4 weight, and that really just allows us to make beautiful wearables with it. This would make really, really pretty baby items as well. I plan to use it for all kinds of things, so make sure to look out for that. Now this wrap, we're going to start here in the center and just work back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. We're going to work in turning rows, so we're going to chain and turn at the end of each row, and you're just going to keep continuing the same 4-row repeat all the way until your wrap is as large as you would like it to be, and then we'll just add these fun tassels on the end. Now the tassel tutorial is a different video, so make sure to visit my channel for that. It should be the last video I posted is for the tassel tutorial. In this video, I'm just going to show you how to make the wrap itself, and then you can adorn it with tassels if you choose to, or you don't have to. But if you grab 4 skeins of the Feels Like Butta yarn, you will have plenty to make your entire wrap with the tassels in the size that I made it. Now, the dimensions for my wrap are about 82 inches by 36 inches without the tassels. That's a nice size wrap that you can also wear as a scarf. Any bigger than that would be a bit cumbersome as a scarf, but again, totally up to you. You can add or take away sequences of that 4-row repeat we're going to do to kind of customize to how you want it to be shaped. All right, so here we go. Let's get started. We're going to start with a foundation chain, and we're just going to chain 4. Now, you can use a magic ring method if you prefer. I like the chain 4 and join that you'll see me doing here, but if you like magic rings, you can go ahead and use that. So chain 4, we're going to slip stitch into the very first stitch there next to the slip knot. Just go ahead and slip stitch. So we're forming a ring, and then we're going to stitch into the center of the ring. If you can see that there, right there in the middle of those 4 stitches, we have a little opening. So I'm going to chain up 2, and then I'm just going to stitch right down into the middle of that ring, and I'm going to make a double crochet right down into the center. So just a regular double crochet. Make sure your tail is out of the way. Okay, so we have a double crochet. We're going to work 1 more double crochet into the ring itself. Again, not into the stitches, but into the ring in the middle. So we have 2 double crochets. We're going to chain 2 now. This is the very basis of the wrap, so we can see where we've stitched in the center. Now we're going to chain 2. What the chain 2 is going to do is it's going to provide basically the corner that creates the triangle shape. So after we've chained 2, we're going to work 2 more double crochets still into that same ring, into the same spot where we stitched our first 2. And now this is it for row 1. So this is all we've got to do for row 1. We just have our 2 double crochets, a chain 2, and 2 more double crochets. So now we're ready for row 2 where we need to chain 2 and turn. So this is how it should be looking. We should have a teeny tiny little triangle shape starting to form. So after we chain 2 and turn, we're ready for row 2. In the very first stitch, we're going to work 2 double crochets in the same spot. So 2 double crochets. Now we're going to double crochet in the next stitch. So we have 1 more stitch to work before the chain 2 space. So that's this one right here. We're going to work a regular double crochet here. So we should have 3 double crochets so far in row 2. 2 in the first stitch, 1 in the next. Now we're at the chain 2 spot, and we're going to work the exact same thing in the chain 2 spot on every row. It's going to be a double crochet, another chain 2 to keep that triangle shape consistent, and then another double crochet into that same chain 2 space. So that little cluster is going to be the same on almost every row. It's a double crochet, a chain 2, and a double crochet all into the chain 2 space. Now we're just going to kind of mirror what we did on the first side. We're going to double crochet in the next stitch, and then that very last stitch work 2 double crochets. Basically, we have to increase on each end of every row. And by increase, I mean work more than 1 stitch in the same spot so that we maintain that flat top on our triangle, and we kind of maintain the same triangle space shape throughout the project. Okay, so this is how it should be looking. We should have a slightly larger wide triangle shape. We're going to chain 2 and turn. Now this next row is our lace row. I'll call it our lace row. It's row 3. We're going to work again an increase at the beginning of the row. The very first stitch gets 2 double crochets. That will always be the same. Every row needs an increase at the beginning and end. So we have our 2 double crochets. Now to create our lace, we're going to chain 1. We're going to skip the next stitch, and we're going to double crochet in the following. So chain 1, skip 1, and double crochet. This is going to create kind of a little gap or opening that's going to look like lace as we move forward. So after we double crochet, we'll chain 1 again, skip 1, but after we skip 1, we come to our chain 2 space. So we're going to do the same thing we did on the last row. We're going to double crochet into the chain 2 space. Remember, we chained 1 before we worked into the chain 2 space, so we still have those little gaps that are going to look like lace later on. So we've double crocheted, we're going to chain 2, and we're going to double crochet again into the chain 2 space to maintain that point of our triangle. Now we're just going to mirror what we did on the first side. So we're going to chain 1, we're going to skip that next stitch, we're going to double crochet in the following stitch to create another little gap. We're going to chain 1 again, and we're going to skip 1, and we should have 1 stitch left after we skip 1. So we're going to work 2 double crochets into that very last stitch, because remember, no matter what row we're on, we're going to increase in the first and the last stitch of every row. That will be true of this entire pattern. So here we can see that the lace is starting to take shape. We have some gaps going on. As we move forward and repeat a bunch, this row will definitely look more and more like lace as you move forward, but you can start to see the gaps and the kind of look that it's creating. Now we're going to chain 2 and turn. This next row is easy. We're just going to double crochet in every stitch along. Again, remembering our increase at the beginning of the row, 2 double crochets in the first stitch, and then the rest of the row till we get to the chain 2 space is just going to get 1 double crochet in each stitch all the way down. That includes the chain 1, skip 1 areas. So we're going to double crochet here in the next stitch. Now we've come to a chain 1, skip 1 spot. We're going to double crochet into that chain 1 space. You can work into the chain 1 stitch as well. It doesn't really make a huge difference. I think it's easier to just work into the chain 1 space, but that's just my preference. It's not going to change anything about the shape or drape of your wrap, just personal preference. So double crochet in each stitch all the way along until we get to the chain 2 space. Now that does include that last double crochet and that last chain 1 space before the chain 2 space. So here we have our last stitch is going to be worked into a double crochet. Now we've come to the chain 2 space, and we're going to work our normal double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet into the chain 2 space. So we have a double crochet, we're chaining 2, another double crochet into the opening. That should become fairly easy to manage. That's only going to what we work into the chain 2 space is only going to change once, and we'll see that on the next row, but it's a fairly easy mindless repeat once you do it a couple of times. And again, we're just going to double crochet in each stitch, including the chain 1 spaces, all the way back across until we get to the end where we'll increase. Now make sure that you're not adding or skipping any stitches working around that chain 2 space. I know that sometimes it's a little confusing about where to stitch, but a good rule of thumb is just to count your stitches on either side of that chain 2 when you've finished a row, and if they match up and you're increasing by 4 stitches on each row, even with your repeats, you'll know that everything is lining up how it should, and you should have the correct number of stitches. So increase by 4 on each row, and each side should always have the same number of stitches to the other side of the triangle. So here we can see how it's looking after row 4. Now we're ready for row 5. We're just going to chain 1 and turn for row 5. Don't chain 2 this time, because this is going to be our bobble row. And you can see here that I did chain 2 and I have to pull one out real quick. Remember, just chain 1. I wasn't paying attention when I was filming, but I wanted to leave that mistake in just to highlight that you really need to only chain 1 here. Chaining 2 will kind of mess you up later on. So we've chained 1. Now we're going to be working in single crochets and bobbles for row 5. So we're just going to work 2 single crochets in the very first stitch of the row, again increasing here. So 2 single crochets, single crochet in the next stitch. Now we're ready for our bobble stitch. I'm going to show you exactly how I work my bobbles. Follow along with me here. We're going to yarn over, insert your hook in the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops only. Now we have 2 loops on our hook. Yarn over again, insert your hook in the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops only. We have 3 loops on our hook now. We're going to keep going with this. Yarn over, insert your hook in the loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through only 2. We now have 4 loops on our hook. Yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops only. We now have 5 loops on our hook. We need to get to 6. So one more time. Yarn over, insert your hook in the loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops only. We now have 6 loops on our hook. Make sure to count those. And we're going to yarn over and pull through all 6 loops at once. Make sure your tension is loose enough to pull through all those loops. We will be doing lots really more of these, but for now we're going to single crochet in each of the next 3 stitches. Regular single crochets here, 1, 2. Here's the third. We're going to bobble stitch again. We can see here how this should be looking so far with our 1 bobble kind of sticking up off the fabric. If you need to watch a bobble stitch slowly again, rewind the video here and watch the first one again, because I'm not going to go through it with each of these bobble stitches that slowly. But if you'd like to follow along or you're familiar with bobble stitches, just make sure that you're bobbling where you do 5 partial double crochets, so that repeat where we picked up a loop, until you have 6 loops on your hook before you pull through. So here we should have 2 stitches left before our chain 2 space. We're going to go ahead and bobble again. So there's 2 partial double crochets, 3, 4, 5. We should have 6 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over, pull through all 6 loops, and then single crochet in that last stitch before our chain 2 space. Every single row of row 5 that you repeat, or a bobble row, you will wind up with a bobble and then 1 single crochet before your chain 2 space. No matter how many times you've repeated and how big your wrap gets, it will always be that way right before the chain 2. So here in the chain 2 space, we're going to work a single crochet, a chain 2, and a single crochet. You'll notice that that's very similar to our other chain 2 space clusters. It's just single crochets instead of double crochets, but the same general idea. It should look a little bit pointier, so don't be freaked out if it looks a little pointy. Now we're going to mirror everything that we did on the first side here. So we're going to single crochet in that very next stitch. Everything should be very symmetrical. So this stitch right here, single crochet. And then we're going to bobble in the next stitch. So we have our chain 2 space, we have 1 single crochet, and then we're going to bobble in our next one. And if you get tripped up at all or reading written patterns is really confusing and you're doing your repeats, that I'm not going to go through every single row of this wrap on the video because we'd be here for 10 hours. Just make sure that everything is lining up and symmetrical with the row on the other side. So we're bobbling, working a regular bobble stitch. And then we're going to single crochet in each of the next 3 stitches. Same thing as before. And in all your bobble rows, you're always going to, when you're repeating and working lots and lots of bobbles, when your wrap gets bigger, you're always going to work 3 single crochets between your bobbles unless you're at the very beginning or end of that line of bobbles on that side, if that makes sense, hopefully. So we should have 3 single crochets and then we should have 3 stitches left in our row. So we're going to bobble, and then we'll work those last 2 stitches. Again, no matter how big your wrap gets, when you're repeating your bobble rows, every single one will always end with 3 stitches left, and you need to bobble and then work those last 2 stitches the same way. If you're getting toward the end of your bobble row and you don't have the 3 stitches that line up to be bobble and then those last 2, something's gone wrong and you have too many or too few stitches. So those last 2 stitches are just going to get a single crochet and then a single crochet increase on that very last stitch, which is 2 single crochets in the same spot. Again, mirroring the very beginning of this row. So this is how your bobble row should be looking. It's the most complicated row of the whole thing. So if you have made it this far, you are in the clear. It gets easier from here on out, and you're just repeating what we've already done. So at this point, we're chaining 2 and turning. We're going to work 2 double crochets in the first stitch. We're basically repeating row 4 here. We're just going to work 2 double crochets and then double crochet in each stitch all the way along to the chain 2 space. Now I wanted to show you how I'm doing this though, because sometimes when we haven't worked with bobbles before, it can be a little confusing where to stitch into the bobble. So I wanted to show you just how I'm doing it. It's fairly straightforward, but I know that you guys are visual learners and I am too, and it really helps to watch someone do an entire repeat all the way through. So here I have a little line of my double crochets. Again, we just increased in the beginning of the row and then we're just double crocheting once in each stitch all the way down. Fairly straightforward. Basically, you'll see as you continue with this pattern, it's really just a matter of a row of lace stitches, a row of double crochets, a row of bobble stitches, and a row of double crochets. It's just going to alternate like that, lace and bobble with double crochets in between, all on and on and on until your wrap is as big as you'd like it to be. So here I've finished the first row, or the first half of this row. I'm at the chain 2 space. Now, since the row below was our bobble row, we have a single crochet cluster here at the tip of our triangle. So it's a little bit tighter, and I want to get in here and show you where to stitch your double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. It's going to be right in that chain 2 space, but because it was surrounded by single crochets, it's a little bit tighter in there. So just pay close attention, make sure you have good light, and you get in there in the right spot, because if your chain 2 spaces don't line up all the way down your wrap, it will look funny and look kind of crooked. So again, we're just going to double crochet all the way back down this other side, fairly straightforward. But if you notice that you have different numbers of stitches on the right side than the left side of your work, definitely go back and make sure to take it slow and really pay attention. I had to rip out my wrap a couple of times because I was watching TV and stitching and I wasn't paying attention and missed a stitch or accidentally, added an extra stitch here or there. And it really throws things off later, especially with those bobble rows. Things won't line up and look nice and symmetrical. So definitely make sure that you're just paying a little extra attention, especially during these first few repeats of the sequence. So again here, very last stitch, we're working 2 double crochets in the last spot, always increasing at the beginning and end of the rows. And at this point, it should be looking something like this. It won't be an even triangle. It will be kind of obtuse, kind of wide, but that's just the general shape of triangle scarves or triangle wraps. So we're going to chain 2 and turn. And now at this point, we're ready to kind of start repeating. We're ready to do another lace row. Now you'll notice in the written pattern, I don't tell you to repeat until we've finished row 9, but it's mostly because of the way the written pattern is written out. So we really are repeating at this point. We're repeating with another lace row. So I'll take you through that. We're going to work 2 double crochets in the first stitch. Just like we did before on our lace row, we're going to chain 1 and skip 1. So chain 1, skip 1, and double crochet. Now at this point, before when we did our lace row, we had very few stitches in the row. Now we have quite a number of stitches that we can kind of chain 1, skip 1, double crochet all the way down, and we're going to repeat that several times before we get to our chain 2 space. So always chain 1, skip 1, double crochet. Our lace row is always going to be exactly that. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet. So just go ahead and take that all the way to our chain 2 space. Now remember, we will end up with a chain 1 and a skip 1. Here we are, and then we'll work straight into our chain 2 space with a double crochet, a chain 2, and a double crochet. And we can see how that should be looking on the first side. Nice and even. We're going to chain 2, work our second double crochet of our chain 2 cluster. And remember, coming back down the second side, we're going to just keep going, mirroring what we did on the first side. Chain 1. Don't work into that first stitch like I almost did. Chain 1 and skip the first stitch, double crochet in the second. And just continue that all the way down. Everything should match up nicely and look very symmetrical. Again, if it doesn't, make sure that you kind of come back and double check things. So chain 1, skip 1, double crochet all the way down. Just go ahead and continue with that sequence. Now from this point on, your lace row is always going to be the same. It's just a matter of how many stitches you have to work. Always going to be exactly the same kind of pattern, and all of your numbers should line up so that you always do the same thing in that row. So the instructions are always going to be the same. You just have more stitches to work between the beginning and that chain 2 space on each side. So again, last stitch of the row, we're going to work 2 double crochets into that stitch. So 2 double crochets. And everything should look nice and symmetrical. Nice and even. And from here on, it's kind of easy breezy. I will go ahead and show you our next row. We're going to chain 2, turn. We're going to double crochet twice in the first stitch as always. And then just a regular double crochet in each stitch all the way along. I'm pretty sure that you guys could figure it out from here on out, but I want to just make absolutely sure that you're comfortable with the pattern and comfortable with proceeding with all of your repeats, and I've shown you enough to get you going to repeat on your own confidently. So again, we're just double crocheting in each stitch all the way down, including those chain 1 spaces, so make sure you're working into the chain 1 spaces as well as the tops of the double crochets. This is how it should be looking. So go ahead and work all the way down. After you get through the first couple of repeats of the sequence, you will start to realize that this is a perfect kind of Netflix project, and you can just turn a movie on and you probably won't even have to look at the pattern or look at the video after a little while because you have just memorized it. It's really becomes that easy and brainless after a few of the repeats. I know it looks a little bit complicated at this point, but after you do it yourself for a few minutes, it really becomes very, very simple. So here I've worked all the way down the first side. In my chain 2 space, I'm working a double crochet, a chain 2, and a double crochet. Also make sure that you, right before the chain 2 space, you end on double crochet stitch, you're working into the top of a stitch, not into the top of a chain one space. It will always be that way when you're working your double crochet row after a lace row, no matter how big your wrap gets. So we've worked our chain 2 cluster. We're going to double crochet in that very first stitch. Make sure not to skip it. Again, it should be in the top of a double crochet stitch, not in a chain 1 space. And then proceed on with your chain 1 spaces and the rest of your double crochet stitches all the way down. So just go ahead and continue all the way down the other side until you get to the last stitch, where once again we will increase as always. I did want to point out here while I'm just stitching along the second side that it would be very easy to add kind of stripes to this pattern. You could work each repeat in a different color or alternate colors. The Feels Like Butter line of yarn from Lion Brand has a lot of great colors for baby, but they also have a lot of great fashion colors. They have a beautiful teal color. They have some browns, some neutrals. There's lots of great options, and this yarn is really affordable. It's only $5 a skein. So for $20, you can make such an amazing heirloom style statement piece that feels so soft and so luxurious. I mean, this could easily be sold for triple what it would cost you to make. So I'm just throwing that out there. Very, very soft, very, very easy to use, and it's very affordable too, and comes in some great colors. So get creative with the colors. It doesn't have to be solid. So here I finished my double crochet row. I'm ready to chain just one and turn. I'm ready for my bobble row. Here we're at row 9. If you're keeping track with the written pattern, we're at row 9 at this point. So here we're just going to work all the way back across with our bobble row. So I'm going to take you through this second set of bobble rows just to make sure that you have a good grasp on how the bobble rows will work moving forward with your repeats. So again, same thing as before, we're going to work with single crochets here, 2 single crochets in the first, a single crochet in the next stitch. Now we're ready to bobble. So the third stitch of the row, we're going to work a bobble stitch. I do have my bobble stitch instructions written out in the written pattern as well, which can be found at the link in the description box below. Very easy to follow. The written pattern isn't super overwhelming, but the video may work better for you guys. So here we are finishing our bobble stitch. We have 6 loops. We pull through all of them. We're going to single crochet in each of the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. So there we have our first bobble worked. We're always going to work a bobble and then single crochet 3 and then another bobble, and we're going to repeat that until we get to our last bobble before our chain 2 space. So bobble, single crochet in the next 3, and bobble. We're working our second bobble here in the row. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Go ahead and pull through. Single crochet in each of the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. We're ready to bobble again because we haven't reached that chain 2 space yet. We're not close to it, so we know we need to bobble and keep continuing. Go ahead and bobble again. If you haven't worked a lot of bobble stitches up until this point, if you're still kind of new to the stitch, this wrap will really get you confident with bobble stitches, because as your wrap grows, you're going to do more and more bobble stitches in your bobble rows, and you will wind up making quite a few of them. So if you want to learn bobbles and want to get good at them, this is a good project. So I've single crocheted 3, and now I have 2 stitches left. This is perfect. I need to bobble. You will always wind up with 2 stitches left before your chain 2 space on your bobble rows. If you see anything else on any of your repeats, you know that there's a stitch miscount somewhere, and there's somewhere that you've gotten off your stitch count. So bobble in the next to last stitch before our chain 2 space. We have 1 stitch left. We're going to single crochet. Now we're at a chain 2 space and the first side is done. You can see here how it should be looking. Nice and evenly spaced and looking great. That texture is just so beautiful. And now in our chain 2 space, we're just going to work a single crochet, a chain 2, and a single crochet into the chain 2 space. Now make sure you don't skip your next stitch. Go ahead and single crochet in that first stitch on the second side. Again, we need to mirror what we did on the first side, so we were going to work a bobble next. So that was 1 single crochet and then a bobble. And then at this point, we're just going to repeat all the way down with our regular bobble and single crochet in the next 3, bobble, single crochet in the next 3, all the way down till we get to almost the end of the row once again. So I'll just kind of keep here with you and stick with your pace. If you need to pause this or rewind at any point, that's the beautiful thing about YouTube videos as opposed to like an in-person demonstration or a class. You can pause, repeat, watch again, come back to it later. If you need to, just rewind and start at the beginning of the sequence every time you need to repeat, you're more than welcome to do that. So just go ahead and continue, bobble and single crochet in the next 3. So here's 1, 2, and 3 single crochets. We're going to bobble again. We can see that this is lining up nicely. It's very symmetrical, and we can really start to see kind of the shape of the wrap and how everything is going to look as we move forward. It's also really satisfying working up this pattern because all of those bobbles kind of line up in a nice symmetrical staggered way, and it really makes my organized type A brain really happy that everything lines up perfectly and just looks nice and even and perfectly spaced, and all of that just really makes my brain relax. Can you tell I'm a little type A? Okay, so here we are almost to the end of the row. We're working our last bobble. After our last bobble, we should have 2 stitches left in the row. If you have any more or less than 2 stitches after your last bobble, then you know again that you've missed or added something along the way and you need to stop here. Don't just continue and think, oh, it'll work itself out, because I promise it won't. It'll just be more and more crooked and off center later. So your last 2 stitches are going to be just a single crochet and then 2 single crochets in the last. Again, that increase on the last side. So this is how it should be looking. We should be getting a nice textured look, lots of nice lace and texture. The fabric should move pretty easily. It shouldn't be real stiff. Go ahead and chain 2 and turn. Now this is where in the written pattern technically you have your repeat of rows 6 through 9. 6, 7, 8, and 9. So repeating row 6, we're going to work 2 double crochets in the first stitch. And then we're going to just work double crochets all the way down. It should become pretty clear moving forward that it's just, if you really want to simplify thinking about this pattern and this repeat, it's really just row of double crochets, row of lace stitches, row of double crochets, row of bobble stitches. Again, there's increases in your chain 2 space clusters and all of that jazz. But if you want to think about it in a super simplified manner, that's really all there is to this pattern. So just double crochet along once in each stitch. Everything should lie nice and flat. You shouldn't get any like rippling or puckering. That's how you know that you might have a kind of stitch count variance that's undesirable for this particular pattern, because again, we want those bobbles to line up nice and straight and beautiful. So just double crochet each stitch along, so on and so forth, and you're just going to repeat these rows of lace and bobbles with double crochets in between, just as we have been doing until you have a big giant wrap that's nice and squishy and cuddly. I wound up working a total of 63 rows before I finished off. After row 63, I just worked a single crochet in every stitch along to give it a nice finished edge, and I'll show you that here in just a moment. Okay, so here I've finished my next row of double crochets. After my bobble stitches, you can see what it should be looking like. I just did the exact same thing I've been doing. And I wanted to show you the finished wrap, my white one. Now I didn't film this video using the white because it's really difficult to see the stitches, but I did want my sample to be in white just because it's the perfect cloud wrap. It's just awesome in white. I really love it, but I wanted to make sure that you could see what I was doing, so I used a different color. But here we can see how the finished wrap should be looking. I want to show you the edging here. I've just repeated over and over and over again. We can see here that my sample in the pink that I've been showing you and working with looks exactly the same as the very beginning center here of my white one. It's exactly the same size. Everything is just identical. So we know that if you just keep going with these repeats, it will look exactly like mine. If you followed along with this video up until now and you have something that looks like this, just keep going and it'll look just like mine when it's all done. And once I got done with all of my repeats again through row 63, my row 64 is just a single crochet in each stitch all the way around. I worked 2 single crochets into that chain 2 space at the end. And then that was it. I finished off, I wove my ends, and I added some chubby tassels. And if you want the chubby tassel tutorial, again, it's just a real short, easy video that's on my main channel page. So if you go back to my Sorella YouTube account, you'll see the chubby tassel DIY tutorial there. Real easy to make, real easy to tie on, and then you'll just weave your ends. And then you have a wrap that can be worn around the shoulders, it can be worn wrapped around your neck. It's just really versatile, really soft and cozy, perfect for all different seasons because it's not something that's super thick. You can see here where I just tied on my tassel and I wove in those ends. So I hope you guys really enjoy making this wrap. I want to see all of your creations. Make sure that you tag me on social media at Sorella on Instagram and Facebook, and just really have fun with this wrap. I hope you enjoy making it as much as I did. And I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel if you haven't already to see more fun crochet tutorials. I have lots of fun things planned for 2018 and I can't wait for you to see them. Thanks so much for watching.